We're in the studio this morning with Indiana County District Attorney Bob Manzi. Our conversation brought to you by Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. And good morning.
Good morning, Todd. How are you today?
Wonderful. Good to have you with us here today as we talk about issues for your office. And we kick off this series of conversations with you. And today we want to talk a little bit about a very, very serious, very sad that it even exists, this situation, but child abuse, child sexual abuse, they're real things, and they're here just as they are everybody else.
They are, Todd. They're in our county. They're in every county. They're everywhere across the nation. My office has teamed up with Scott Brady, the AUSA, to partner on a human trafficking initiative in western Pennsylvania, in which we're going to be focusing our efforts with law enforcement on various human trafficking issues across the state and across the country. One of the issues that always occurs in every county and every place is child abuse. Unfortunately, it's an evil that exists, and law enforcement is always diligent in working to detect it, to investigate it, to prosecute it. Recently, we've had a couple major cases, very significant child abuse cases that have been charged, and we'll be bringing them to trial over the next year. One of the things that my office intends on doing over this next year is we're going to be partnering with the great people at the Alice Paul House. They do a phenomenal job for victim services and education. We want to partner with them. I've reached out to national experts in child abuse and child abuse prosecutions and grooming. And the goal is over the next month or so, I want to do a virtual presentation for parents, guardians on signs of child abuse, signs of grooming. What can you look out for? After we charge these cases and they hit the news, I had a lot of parents reaching out saying, what should I look for? What are some of the things I can try to find out? And we want to help educate folks in hopes to stopping it from moving forward from the grooming stage.
It's just a sickening thing, and you have to feel for the people who are actually there in the front lines investigating and helping these people, because they have to see things that nobody wants to see, but they have to stop it, and that's why you make efforts such as this. And it's just insidious. And I don't know that the methods of human trafficking are changing all that much over the course of the last 10 years as opposed to 20 or 30 years ago. I don't know if the ways they're able to hide and to get away with things are any different, but I do know that it's a very sophisticated setup in some cases, isn't it?
It's a very sophisticated setup, and especially with the means of social media and the internet, it's added an extra tool for those individuals to bypass law enforcement and to find other victims, to find other people to victimize. Mm-hmm. So, law enforcement, what used to take 10 steps now takes 100 steps, but they're still doing it. Our law enforcement does a phenomenal job. The individuals that specialize in those investigations, they hear horror stories on a daily basis, and my hat's off to them for the investigations they do, the work they have to put in to make a good prosecutorial case. And then they partner with people at the Alice Paul House for Victim Services, or the members of the Care Center of Indiana, who does the forensic evaluations and gathers that information so that we can prosecute individuals.
I don't know that there are hard and fast investigative rules when it comes to determining for us, for the lay people, determining what is really happening within a family dynamic or outside of a family dynamic when sexual abuse is involved. But are the people surrounding the victims of child abuse generally aware that there's something going on?
No, not really. Many times we'll have somebody who's victimized and they'll say, I didn't know what was going on. Typically what we have is we have a perpetrator that finds a victim's vulnerability, a family's vulnerability, and they exploit that. And, they find out what that child, what makes them thrive. Maybe it's an attention to this, or maybe it's allowing them to do something else. And then unfortunately they find out down the road. One of the things that I've always believed is you just got to trust your gut. If you're a parent, you know your child. Mm-hmm. And if you think something's going wrong, you need to look into it. You know your child better than anybody else in the world. And don't be afraid to reach out to some experts to say, hey, I've seen some things happening with my child that don't seem in line with the child I know. Maybe you can help me out. And sometimes it's tough to reach out for help, but when you reach out for help, it could stop something more serious from happening.
What are some of the things that we can look for?
You look for changes in their regular behavior. A child who regularly has a normal appetite all of a sudden isn't eating, all of a sudden isn't being as social, doesn't want to go to places where they normally would have gone, or they show a particular interest in something that all of a sudden kind of seems out of left field. Now, these are very generalized cues to look for. They could mean a lot of things. It's not necessarily mean that there's some sort of abuse going on, but it certainly gives you enough pause as a parent or a guardian to want to look into it. Mm-hmm. One of the big things with technology today is just knowing what technologies your children are on. It's easy for an older person to say, hey, I really don't get technology. They're on a phone. I don't know what they're doing. But we hope to educate on what those apps are, what some of those websites are, what can be done, even if you're not tech savvy, to kind of help out with stopping children going down a bad alley on the internet.
From an investigative standpoint, we do understand that authorities are always monitoring online traffic, social media traffic, and they're able to spot some signs there that there might be trouble, and that can lead to an open investigation. But really, you need the public to step up, don't you?
Oh, you absolutely need the public. And one thing with this pandemic, and we discussed it in law enforcement very early on, is one of the areas in which we find child abuse, child neglect early on is other people who get to see the children. There are teachers, our librarians, our coaches, our staff at a YMCA or a similar facility where they see kids on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and they can say, hey, something's going on, and maybe that child can disclose something to them. Once the pandemic hit and children were being kept in a place where maybe the abuse was happening, it's very scary that there's no outlet for them. They're stuck there.
One of the things that we might believe, and probably it's true, is that most child sexual abuse happens within a family. Would I be correct in saying that?
The statistics have shown that most abuse happens from either somebody in the family or somebody known to the family.
Yeah. And so obviously you watch the behavior of those around the child as well as watching the behavior of the child themselves. Do you have events planned where you can go and speak to groups, or can such things be organized? Somebody calls from a parent-teacher group, for instance, and says, we'd like someone to come and speak to us about this.
Absolutely. If there's a group out there, a parent-teacher group, or really any group that wants us to come and do a presentation, they can contact my office, and we're going to get that scheduled. What we're building is trying to build a large virtual platform so that we can reach all over the county, anybody that wants to join us. Also to have that presentation recorded so it'll stay up on our social media site so people can view it at any time.
And resources online include those who are already convicted of sexual assault crimes. And I don't think enough people realize that those resources are out there, that they can see who's living around their neighborhood.
You can go up to the Pennsylvania State Police Megan's Law website. You're able to look around your county, or they're able to look at individuals to find out who's around you, whether they're living around you, where they work, where they may go. And it does give you some awareness of people that you should be keeping an eye on, especially around your children.
One of the things we see often in court cases is after there is a conviction or a guilty plea in sex-related crimes, there is a Megan's Law evaluation done before sentencing. And so between the plea and before the sentencing, there is a Megan's Law evaluation. What goes into one of those evaluations?
Well, what goes into there's a sexual offense assessment board in the state of Pennsylvania in which somebody is assessed to determine whether or not they're considered under the state's criteria as a violent sexual predator. And if that does happen, then there's enhanced supervision that goes along with it. So, the charge, depending on what the person is convicted of, whether they plead guilty or found guilty, certain charges simply require listing on Megan's Law. And then if they're found to be a violent sexual predator, there could be enhanced reporting requirements. There could be enhanced treatment requirements, depending upon that state criteria. So that's something that happens outside of our office.
From a prosecutor's standpoint, when you are prosecuting a sexual case, particularly one involving children, You mentioned that it really is a complicated process, and there are a lot of steps to take. Has that actually increased? Has the difficulty of prosecuting one of these cases increased in recent years?
It certainly has. And one of the things that really affects the prosecution the most is where the victim's at in their trauma. This is something that they're going to live with the rest of their life. Mm-hmm. And obviously, we can only take a case prosecutorial as far as our victims can let us. And if a victim is at a point in their trauma where, they're just completely shut down, and if they can't testify, then we can't prosecute. And we don't want to re-traumatize them by forcing them to do something that's only going to hurt them even more. So there is certainly a balance between how far we can press a case and what we can do to help the victim.
Well, that really makes what the care center does really, really important, doesn't it?
The people at the care center, the people at Alice Paul, they do so much that helps our office and helps our victims in this county. Without them, I'm not sure what we would do.
All right. So from a local standpoint, an Indiana County standpoint, where are we going to find more information about child sexual abuse and what's being done about it?
What can be found is on our social media site, we're going to be pushing out the events that we're going to be doing. Anybody can call our office if they want us to do events or do presentations. Children and Youth Services is always available to help with people that has questions, as well as the Alice Paul House and the Care Center.
Very good. District Attorney Bob Manzi, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Todd. Have yourself a great day.
You too. It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1170 and AM 1170.